Imagine waking up one morning to discover that the system everyone trusted for decades is suddenly turning against them. Jobs disappear, savings vanish. Families who worked hard their entire lives are now standing in food lines. Meanwhile, a tiny group at the top somehow becomes even richer. In moments like these, something strange always happens. An old idea that many believed was dead quietly returns. People begin asking a dangerous question: what if capitalism isn't working anymore? And history shows that this question has changed nations more times than most people realize. It doesn't begin with angry protests, it doesn't begin with revolutions. It begins with ordinary people feeling that the rules no longer apply equally to everyone. A father working two jobs still can't afford rent. A college graduate carries massive debt while billionaires add billions in a single week. Small businesses disappear while giant corporations grow even larger. Confidence slowly turns into frustration. Frustration quietly becomes resentment. And before anyone notices, conversations that once sounded impossible begin spreading everywhere. But the real story is only beginning. For most of history, people lived under kings, emperors, and feudal lords. Wealth belonged to a tiny elite. The average person had almost no opportunity to improve their life. Then came something revolutionary. Markets opened, businesses competed, innovation exploded, factories transformed economies. Capitalism didn't promise equality, it promised opportunity. And for millions, it delivered exactly that. Entire generations escaped poverty, cities expanded, technology advanced faster than ever before. It looked like humanity had finally discovered the perfect economic engine. But hidden beneath this success was a weakness that almost nobody wanted to discuss. As industries grew, so did fortunes beyond imagination. Railroad owners, steel tycoons, oil barons, and factory magnates became symbols of incredible ambition. Their success inspired millions to dream bigger. Hard work seemed to have unlimited rewards. Countries embracing capitalism became wealthier than much of the world. Living standards improved. New inventions changed everyday life. Families believed each generation would live better than the last. It felt unstoppable. But nobody could have predicted what came next. Success created competition. Competition created innovation. But innovation also created winners and losers. Some businesses became so powerful they crushed smaller competitors before they even had a chance. Workers often labored 12 or 14 hours a day under dangerous conditions for very little pay. Child labor became common. Entire neighborhoods lived beside massive factories covered in smoke. While owners built luxurious mansions, workers struggled to survive. The wealth gap began expanding at a speed that frightened many observers. Yet most leaders believed the market would eventually fix itself. That assumption would soon face its greatest test. Into this world stepped new thinkers asking uncomfortable questions. If factories couldn't operate without workers, why did workers receive so little of the wealth they created? If society depended on everyone contributing, why should only a handful enjoy extraordinary riches? These weren't just philosophical debates anymore. They were becoming political movements. One of the loudest voices belonged to Karl Marx, who argued that capitalism carried the seeds of its own destruction. He believed inequality would continue growing until workers eventually revolted. Many dismissed him as a dreamer. Others feared he might be right. But history had another surprise waiting. The late 19th century witnessed astonishing industrial growth. Railroads connected continents. Electricity transformed cities. Manufacturing exploded. Investors became richer than ever before. Stock markets climbed higher and higher. Optimism filled the air. Newspapers celebrated business leaders like heroes. Ordinary families borrowed money believing tomorrow would always be better. It felt like prosperity had no limits. But beneath all the excitement, dangerous cracks were spreading through the foundation. Then came panic. In 1929, confidence vanished almost overnight. The stock market crashed, banks collapsed, businesses closed their doors. Millions lost everything. The Great Depression wasn't just an economic disaster, it was a psychological earthquake. Men who once proudly provided for their families stood in endless bread lines. Children went hungry. Entire towns became silent. Capitalism suddenly looked vulnerable. For countless people, the system that had promised opportunity now offered only desperation. And when fear replaces hope, people become willing to consider ideas they once rejected. Across the world, socialist movements suddenly gained momentum. Governments expanded public programs. They created jobs, built infrastructure, introduced social protections, and increased regulation. Some countries embraced moderate reforms, others moved much further. Citizens weren't necessarily abandoning capitalism because they loved socialism. Many simply believed something had gone terribly wrong and demanded someone fix it. The old promises no longer felt enough. But the story didn't end there. After World War II, something remarkable happened. Many capitalist countries learned from their mistakes. Governments introduced unemployment benefits, pensions, labor protections, healthcare programs, stronger financial oversight, and public education investments. Businesses still competed, markets still existed, but safety nets expanded dramatically. Economic growth returned. The middle class flourished. Millions bought homes. College became accessible. Families built wealth across generations. For a while, it appeared capitalism had adapted and become stronger than ever. Yet another cycle was quietly beginning. As decades passed, confidence returned. Regulations that had once protected financial systems were gradually relaxed in many places. Globalization accelerated. Technology reshaped industries. Corporations became multinational giants. Productivity increased enormously. But something strange happened. Worker wages often failed to keep pace with overall economic growth. Executive compensation skyrocketed. Housing prices climbed beyond what many young families could afford. Wealth became increasingly concentrated among those who already owned valuable assets. Most people noticed the gap growing but assumed it wasn't yet a crisis. They were wrong. Then came 2008. The financial crisis spread like wildfire. Mortgage markets collapsed, investment banks failed, retirement savings disappeared. Millions lost their homes through no fault of their own. Governments rushed to rescue major financial institutions because they feared the entire economy would collapse. Ordinary citizens watched something they couldn't understand. Banks that had taken enormous risks received emergency support, while many struggling families received far less help. Trust suffered a devastating blow. One question echoed everywhere. If capitalism rewards responsibility, why were reckless institutions being rescued while ordinary people paid the price? That question refused to disappear. Young people entering adulthood after the crisis faced a completely different reality from their parents. Student debt reached record levels. Home ownership became increasingly difficult. Stable careers turned into temporary contracts and gig work. Social media amplified comparisons between everyday struggles and billionaire lifestyles. Every luxury yacht, private jet, and record breaking bonus became another reminder that prosperity wasn't reaching everyone equally. Anger slowly transformed into political energy, and socialism, once considered an outdated idea by many, suddenly sounded appealing again to a new generation. But here's where the story becomes far more complicated. Most people calling for socialist policies today aren't demanding governments control every factory or abolish private businesses. Many simply want affordable healthcare, stronger worker protections, better education, higher wages, and fairer taxation. Meanwhile, critics argue these policies can reduce innovation, discourage investment, increase government dependence, and slow economic growth. Both sides believe they're protecting society from disaster. Both sides point to history as proof. Yet history refuses to give either side a simple victory. Countries that embraced extreme versions of socialism often face their own devastating problems. Central planning frequently struggled to allocate resources efficiently. Innovation slowed, bureaucracies expanded, shortages became common. Individual freedoms were sometimes restricted. Entire economies stagnated under excessive government control. The promises of equality often collided with the realities of human incentives. Fear replaced ambition. Productivity declined. Many experiments ended in disappointment or collapse. But supporters insisted those failures didn't erase the genuine problems capitalism continued producing. Meanwhile, pure free market systems also revealed painful weaknesses. Financial bubbles repeatedly formed. Housing became unaffordable in many cities. Healthcare costs soared in some nations. Economic shocks often hit lower income families hardest. Large corporations gained enormous influence over politics and markets. Technology created extraordinary wealth while replacing millions of traditional jobs. Every success story seemed accompanied by another growing inequality. It was as if both systems carried strengths that people admired and weaknesses they feared. The most successful economies often landed somewhere in the middle without admitting it. They allowed businesses to compete aggressively while maintaining rules designed to protect workers, consumers, and financial stability. They encouraged entrepreneurs while funding public education and infrastructure. They embraced markets but accepted that markets alone couldn't solve every problem. Ironically, many of the countries praised for their capitalist success also relied on policies that critics labeled socialist. Yet political debates continued pretending there were only two choices. Every generation experiences its own economic shock. For one generation, it was the Great Depression. For another, it was the oil crises. Then came globalization, the dot-com crash, the financial crisis, and the pandemic. Every major disruption creates uncertainty. Every uncertainty creates fear. And fear changes political conversations faster than prosperity ever can. When people believe the future will be worse than the past, they become willing to rewrite the rules entirely. That pattern repeats again and again across history. The rise of artificial intelligence has added another layer of uncertainty. Millions now wonder whether machines will replace jobs that once seemed impossible to automate. If technology creates extraordinary profits while eliminating employment opportunities, who benefits from that future? Investors see incredible opportunity. Workers see growing risk. Governments face impossible questions. Should markets decide everything? Or should society intervene before inequality grows even larger? Nobody has a perfect answer, but history suggests these debates will only become louder. What makes this cycle so fascinating isn't that capitalism always fails or socialism always succeeds. It's that public opinion shifts depending on lived experience. During times of prosperity, people celebrate freedom, entrepreneurship, and competition. During crises, they demand protection, fairness, and security. The pendulum swings with every generation. Neither side completely disappears because neither side completely solves the human condition. Behind every economic system lies something much deeper than numbers on a spreadsheet. There is hope, there is fear, there is trust. Capitalism runs on confidence that tomorrow offers opportunity. Socialism gains momentum when people lose confidence that opportunity is being shared fairly. Once trust breaks, rebuilding it becomes incredibly difficult. And trust, more than money itself, may be the most valuable currency any society possesses. Perhaps that's why history keeps repeating this strange dance. Capitalism creates extraordinary wealth, but can also create extraordinary inequality. Socialism promises greater fairness, but often struggles to maintain the incentives that drive innovation and growth. Every generation inherits the achievements of one system and the mistakes of the other. Then it tries to design something better before discovering entirely new problems no one expected. The real question has never been whether capitalism or socialism will win forever. History suggests neither ever truly does. Instead, societies constantly negotiate the balance between freedom and protection, ambition and fairness, competition and compassion. Whenever one side pushes too far, pressure builds beneath the surface until people demand change. The labels may evolve, the policies may change, the arguments may sound different, but the cycle remains astonishingly familiar. And that may be the most unsettling lesson of all. Economic systems don't collapse simply because they're flawed. They begin to crack when enough ordinary people stop believing the system is working for them. Once that belief disappears, ideas that once seemed impossible suddenly become irresistible. Because in the end, people don't just vote for policies, they vote for hope. And whichever system appears to offer that hope in moments of crisis is the one that always finds its way back.